But there was something at McDonald's that broke your heart back in 1990.
Yes, they changed the recipe for the French fries.
Yes.
Those of us who are old enough to remember what a McDonald's French fry tasted like back in the day will know
good,
that it used to be amazing, right? That's why you went to McDonald's. They were the most incredible fries you've ever eaten. And they are not anymore, and they are not anymore for a reason, and that is that McDonald's changed the formula on July 23rd, 1990. And I think that formula change was catastrophic.
And you brought in millennials to do a blind taste test, and even they picked the old fries.
I did.
It was funny.
I went to the America's leading R&D house and had them make me fries the old way and the new way, and we did a blind taste test. My strategy has always been, you have to very consciously differentiate yourself from where you think your professional peer group is going. To the extent that people migrate to things that are accessible online, I feel I should migrate to things that are inaccessible online. So the value, or to the extent that people stop reading books and read, I feel I need to read more books. So what I've been trying to do is to it's why I spend a lot of time in actual physical libraries reading things in hard copy, because there's a kind of a serendipity that you get when this is not in any way meant as a criticism, by the way, of search engines, for example, which are incredibly useful, but they also have limitations. They reward a certain kind of serendipity, and they punish another kind of serendipity, right? And if you're interested in serendipitous learning, as I am, much of what I uncover is uncovered serendipitously. You have to be a student of all of the different mechanisms of chance encounters with the unusual and the insightful. And so that means that not only do I spend a lot of time screwing around online on databases, but I also very, very consciously make sure that I go to physical libraries and walk through the stacks. And even something as simple as you're interested in one book, and then you go and you just look at all of the books that surround it. Right? And the connections are not always, there are connections between them, but it's a different kind of connection than they would be connected online. It's not a keyword connection, right? It's a thematic connection, so there's all these sorts of, you have to be a student of these kinds of the different ways in which ideas cluster. I thought a lot about that in recent years as a way of distinguishing myself from other journalists. Situations where being bad is highly advantageous. If you read, I don't go into this in the book, but if you've read, Innovator's Dilemma, that's what Innovator's Dilemma is all about, right? The disruptive outsider is the one who is incapable of meeting the marketplace needs as the market is traditionally defined. They can't do it, right? So what do? They try a completely new half-assed approach, which in the beginning doesn't work, right? But by that very nature of trying something completely outside the mainstream, they end up upending the, were they any good, they would never be forced to do that. So it's the same kind of principle. I'm uninterested in that topic.
Which one? Well, the relation between gift and practice?
No, I'm uninterested in natural gifts. I know they exist, and I know there's such a thing as talent,
but it's
blah,
not
blah,
fun.
blah. But
Right.
I just feel like, so what, right? Because there are people, I always think of, you're a basketball fan, I always think of Derek Coleman.
Yes.
I remember chatting with a guy who worked for the Sixers, and he said, you have to understand that Derek Coleman was the most gifted man ever to set foot on a basketball court. He said, you've heard a million other names. Nobody was as good as Derek. And who has heard today, who puts Derek Coleman up there in the pantheon? No one. He didn't want to work. He had bad habits. He had a bad attitude. So what? Give me somebody who wants to go to practice in the morning and who wants to try in games, and I want to celebrate him.
If someone were to follow you from the inception to, sort of picking a story or identifying a study to the full book, what happens along the way?
Well, I don't really know. Sometimes I start, there are about 5 or 6 times a year I go to the NYU library and I spend a couple days. Just browsing is too mild a term, but wandering around, going through millions of journals in the most sort of serendipitous way I can, just to kind of see what's out there and see if I can stumble on something. So
Without a clear goal or direction,
no
just
goal
to explore.
whatsoever. No goal whatsoever. So there's that I do as a regular basis, and then I do a fair amount of speaking, and I always try and have conversations with people well outside my world. So today, I gave a talk this morning in Philadelphia, and I was talking to a guy. One of the guys there runs a medical devices company, very, very small one. And so I started talking to him about, because I've always had this idea in my head that it would be really, really fun to compare the way dogs are treated with the way humans are treated, because they're not that dissimilar as problems for medical science. But the systems that surround doggy healthcare and human healthcare are profoundly different, right? So, the same devices are used in various, hip implants, or they're not the same, but analogous devices. Only you do a complex knee surgery on your dog, it's $7,000, and you do it on a human being, it's $100. Now, is a human really 15 times more complex than a dog when it comes to? No. So there's something. But anyway, I sort of had this vague thought, and then I met this guy, and so I started asking about this, and he sort of started riffing on it and gave me his card. Now, that's sort of how it works. You know what I mean? Like, you take advantage of a little thought you had in your head, and when you meet someone by accident who happens to have specialized knowledge, you make sure you get his card.